This is the last session of this workshop. So if there are any questions which are of interest to you, we can take them up now. विचारा हेमंत.
हां सर, बऱ्याचदा असं म्हटलं जातं की जे केंचं हे जे डिस्कोर्सेस किंवा हे नॉलेज आहे ही फिलॉसॉफी आहे ॲक्च्युली, आणि मग प्रॅक्टिकल लाईफमध्ये वापरताना ते थोडंसं कधी अडचणी येते. इज इट फिलॉसॉफी और व्हॉट?
Yeah, this has been the complaint by some people, particularly those people who are involved with vipassana or vipassana. They complain about this. They say that Krishnaji's teaching is theoretical and vipassana is practical because vipassana tells them what to do, while Krishnamurti doesn't tell them what to do. And therefore he is only talking, and then even after hearing or listening to him, people don't know what to do. So naturally they think that it is impractical or only theoretical. But actually it is not so, because what is expected is the lot of brain work is expected in Krishnaji's teaching. Not a physical work in the sense that you start going to the garden and start digging up. So it's not that kind of physical work. It's a work where you have to use the brain, and people just don't know how to use their brain, because even to think in a different way they find it very difficult. And if it is too much of use of brain, then they are fed up. They said, no, I would like to be peaceful. And so they don't use their brain. They are reluctant to use their brains, and therefore they find that if they are not using their brains, then what is there in case teaching? We're just listening and agreeing or disagreeing. And then they feel that it is of no use in daily life, because he doesn't give any clear-cut instructions. He doesn't tell you what to do or what not to do, but he is asking you to find out for yourself. And to find out, one has to use one's brain, and which one doesn't want to use. So that is the difficulty. So it appears as impractical. While in all the other systems, they tell you what to do. They will tell you that sit cross-legged, they will tell you that close your eyes, then they will tell you that now concentrate on your breathing, watch your breathing, watch the sensations that arise in your body, don't react, and all these things. In fact, there are sessions of guided meditation where people are guided through the whole process or system of meditation, and at the end of it they feel quite relaxed, nice, and they feel that they had very good meditation. But actually they have learned nothing in that. They have just experienced certain state, and that meditation is limited to just that much experience. Nothing more comes out of it. So if one wants to feel good, he can just enter into that kind of meditation and feel good. But that's the end of it. Yeah. So that is why there is this complaint. But actually speaking, unless you apply Krishna's teaching, it is of no use. Because merely listening to him and agreeing or disagreeing, it doesn't mean much.
Means you have to use logic.
Yeah, you have to use the brain. That means all the thinking power you have to use it to explore, to find out, to observe. And that people precisely don't do. A person doing vipassana, he is quiet during that sitting. 12 hours, 13 hours a day for 10 days. But after that, when he lives his daily life, he is back to his original nature. So he will just behave like any other person in a slightly modified way. But no,
Other spiritual organizations says that there is no logic. So
there is no logic.
don't use your logic. There is certain
Oh,
things that automatically come.
no. That is absolutely false. Because if you don't use your capacity of logic and rationalization, then you can very easily fall into an illusion. Particularly in hypnotism, they incapacitate you. They just make your common sense go to sleep, and then they just put matter into your head, telling you what it is not, and you simply accept it without using your discretionary capacity, because that capacity is made to sleep. And then anything can just go into you. So that is the easiest way to program a person. You can program a hypnotized person, even up to the details of what action he will do at what time. You up to that much you can program him. So you may say that at such and such time on such and such date you will cough or you will sneeze or you will do this, and that person, without knowing why is he doing that, he will do that. So programming up to that detail is possible. So logic and rationality has to be used. It has to be its highest capacity, and then it has to be quiet. That means nobody can fool you, and because the whole system is intact, nothing is incapacitated, and yet it is quiet because there is no requirement or there is no need for it to function at that time. Therefore, it is quiet. So in that kind of state of mind, you can actually start understanding things. Well,
म्हटलं जातं की जे अशिक्षित किंवा कमी कपॅसिटी असेल त्याची विचाराची त्या लोकांना रिअलायझेशन कसं झालं जसं महाराष्ट्रातल्या संतांनी
because each one's brain has a limited capacity, and as per that capacity he behaves. But that doesn't mean that that capacity is fixed. If one starts using one's brain, then that capacity also enhances, it grows. So one becomes more capable. But if one doesn't use the brain, then the capacity not only doesn't grow, but it also reduces, goes down. And if people are merely passively following things or involved in entertainment, then the brain capacity goes down very fast. So
means this is scientific process.
yeah, so that complaint is not valid. That complaint only says that the persons, they are not willing to use their brains, and by thinking that their brains have very low capacity, not capable of understanding what he is talking about, then that limitation is of their own creation. By thinking like that, they are becoming like that. So it's not the fault of the teachings that they are beyond reach, but persons are not ready to do the work that is required. That is the real reason.
ऍक्च्युली मी कंपॅरिझन नाही करायला पाहिजे पण समजा ओशोची फिलॉसॉफी कारण सुरुवातीला मी
No, Osho just picked up matter from Krishnamurti's works and used it in his own way. So therefore there is no point in listening to him as far as Krishnamurti is concerned. It is better to listen to Krishnamurti directly rather than through him. But one good thing had happened was that through him a lot of people turned towards Krishnamurti, and then they got interested in all these things. So except for that, I don't think there is any other thing in his teaching.
And what it said in spirituality, that is, I am not doer.
Yeah.
So what is that? We are not doer.
Is that a quotation, or you are quoting from somewhere, or what is it?
In spirituality, there is said the truth. Truth is that we are not doer.
No, but where did you pick up that statement? That is what I'm asking.
करता नाही ज्याला म्हणतो आपण मराठीत मी नाही मी करता नाही
नाही नाही, पण ते ते कुठून मिळालं स्टेटमेंट तुम्हाला?
स्पिरिच्युअलिटीच्या डिस्कोर्सेस मध्ये
हा,
स्पिरिच्युअलिटीच्या डिस्कोर्सेस मध्ये
अच्छा अच्छा. म्हणजे मागचं जे लेक्चर झालं,
नाही नाही आपल्या दुसऱ्या स्पिरिच्युअलिटी
अच्छा, दुसरा कोणीतरी लेक्चर देत होतं का क्रिएटिव्हिटीवर?
हे टोटल स्पिरिच्युअलिटीचे वेगवेगळे गुरुजी आहेत आणि
हो हो हो. नाही, दॅट स्टेटमेंट इज नॉट व्हेरी करेक्ट. That is why I asked you the source of that statement.
थिंग्स आर हॅपनिंग ऑटोमॅटिकली त्याला काय म्हणतात ते हॅपनिंग्स थिंग्स आर हॅपनिंग्स दीज ऑल आर हॅपनिंग्स वी आर नॉट क्रिएटिंग दिस आर हॅपनिंग
No, 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 no. No, no, that creates a very wrong sense that you have to just wait for it to happen. But one can wait for the rest of one's life and yet it may not happen. So, which is not correct.
we can create our things.
No, I mean, at our level, whatever is required to be done, that we have to do, which is putting our house in order, right? Ending all the conflict in our day-to-day living. So all this work has to be done, without which the creativity is not possible. I mean, without doing any of this work, and if you say that, yes, it has to just happen, you can't do anything about it, and then you just wait for it to happen, it will never happen. Because the kind of work that is needed, that has to be done. So which is putting our house in order, thinking logically, putting thought in its place, ending all the conflict, understanding fear and eliminating it from our life. So all these things, they have to be done before that creative energy can function in our life. But without doing any of this and simply saying that it has to just happen, you can't do anything about it, then it only means that you just continue to live the way you are and just wait and hope that someday that creativity will happen. But it will never happen.
No, they said you just tune with that power and things will happen. You will be the निमित्त म्हणतात ते मराठी.
No, 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 no. No, no. It is all false kind of thing. There
You
is
are
no.
medium for that only, and
Yeah.
things are
No,
happening.
no, 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 no. Why should you be a medium for that? Because a person is living his chaotic life, a life full of conflict. Then how can he be a medium for the creative energy? He can't be. That creative energy cannot function through him because his life is disorderly. It is chaotic. It is full of conflict. There is fear in him. So in such a life, no creativity can manifest.
आणि शेवटचा छोटा प्रश्न की
Huh.
क्रिएटिव्हिटी ही जी प्रतिभा असते काही लोकांमध्ये की ते
Huh.
करत असेल तो
Yeah, sometimes what happens is that the brain of such persons is quiet and awake, fully quiet and fully awake. Then in that state of the brain, they do get glimpses of that creativity, which then expresses in through them, maybe in the form of a poem or in the form of a painting or in the piece of music and so on. But it is only that expression is limited only to that. But it doesn't seem to affect their life as a whole, because once they are out of that, they are just like ordinary people, like you and me. but in their own field they are highly talented. So Krishnaji would call these people as talented people, but skilled people, but not creative people, because creativity will function throughout, not just in one aspect and all the other aspect it is non-creative. It won't be like that.
जे ओरिजिनल प्रतिभा तुमच्याकडे असली तरच ते तुम्हाला पॉसिबल आहे असं म्हणजे डिरेक्टली बसले काय होणार ते.
Not necessary. I mean, see, the talent they have is the talent of the tools of expression. That means if he is a poet, then he has good knowledge of that language, good knowledge of the words, right? So those are the tools for expression. So whenever there is the touch of that creative energy, right, the infrastructure is already ready, so it gets easily expressed in the form of a poem. So if he is a painter, then it gets expressed through his painting, or a musician through his music, because the infrastructure is ready. So that infrastructure can be, a person can be trained in that. It doesn't have to be inborn. A person can train himself in that. But then whether the creative energy will manifest or not, that will depend on the other factors. It will depend on his life as a whole, or that particular state of the brain. If he is able to.
If somebody does, anybody can do it.
Yeah, of course. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. If one human being can do it, that means any other human being can also do it, provided he is willing to do the work that is required for doing that.
Interested in that.
Yeah.
Because nowadays it is trending in NLP, neuro programming.
Yeah.
You can model anybody if you wish.
Yeah.
You can model that person.
Yeah, it is a kind of programming. You can reprogram a person according to whatever model he wants to be. So that's okay. I mean, just saying that this house is better than that house, or this corner is better than that corner, or this thought is better than that thought. It just seems to be like that.
This morning I spoke on observer is the observed. Yeah, how far it is correct, sir?
I don't remember, Mr. Shankar, what you spoke, because I listened to it at that time only.
Okay,
and
sir.
then later on it doesn't have any place in my brain. Otherwise it will be overloaded with all the, so that's why we do this recording on the.
Yes, sir.
Sir, actually, Shankar sir's question was interesting. He wanted to understand practically the observed phenomena and the division and what one needs to do.
Yeah.
So, if Shankar sir, if you can briefly explain your question, I think it'll be useful.
Yeah, I will try because I don't know why my English is not so good. I'll try. So what I was saying, sir, if I am the observer and you are the observed, I want to see you. Instead of using a tree, I use you or my wife or somebody for that matter.
Yeah.
I want to see my wife, but I am unable to see her. I see her only through my images on her, or opinions or prejudices, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not able to see her. I only see the images, opinions, and other things.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the observed is the observer is me.
Yeah.
Observed is the images, opinions, not my wife. Actually, the observed should be my wife, but unfortunately, the observed is becoming the images and other things.
Yeah.
So that is that how JK has coined that statement, observer is observed.
Yeah, because up to that point you are right that instead of looking at the other person, we are looking at the images which we have created about that other person.
Correct, sir.
Right. And then next thing Krishnaji says is that whatever images we have created, we, the observer, is made up of those images only.
Of course, of course.
Because observer is not different from the images created by him. So when he is looking at the images created by him, he is actually looking at himself.
Himself, exactly, exactly.
So in that
that is
sense,
why
the observer looking at himself means the observed is also himself. So observer is observed. In that sense. Yeah.
It's like an algebra equation.
Yeah, it's like an algebra equation. The very entity, suppose if I am trying to look at myself, then myself is the observed and I am the observer, so both are the same. So observer is the observed in that case. Yes.
So
Thank you, sir.
may I add to this, sir?
Yeah, please.
So, yeah, when we are observing other people and their images, we are also observing ourselves simultaneously and in the process understanding ourselves.
Yes.
So it's a dual process, observing the world outside and observing our own mind so that we should understand ourselves. That's how I understand it.
No, but what Mr. Shankar is saying is that suppose if I am observing the other person, then I am observing the other person through the images I have about that other person.
Yes.
Which means that I am actually observing the images only, not the other person.
Yes.
And if I am observing the images, then I am not different from those images. So in a way, I am observing myself only. But
yes, observer is I am understand. Yes, yes.
But observer is actually seeing himself, but then he is claiming that he is seeing the other person, because what he is saying is that those images are the other person. And therefore, when he is looking at those images, he is saying that he is looking at the other person. So that is the point of duality. But actually, he is forgetting that he is only the creator of those images, and therefore looking at those images is like looking at himself. Now that point is being missed by the observer. What he thinks that those images are the other person, and therefore as he is watching those images, he feels that he is watching the other person, and then he judges the other person according to those images.
Yes.
So that is what the conflict, that means the observer is actually in the illusion. And out of that illusion he functions, and therefore creates all the conflict and the further complications. Yeah.
So my understanding what the observer is, the observed means we try to escape from reality, and we don't realize that we are escaping. And actually, so when we drink or smoke or go to a movie and all, we are trying to escape, but not realizing, the observer is the observed. So we should not be running away. We should be watching it and meet it instantaneously. And that is when the observer is the observed.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the third person.
Yeah, I mean, observer is observed is concerned with oneself. And even if one is bringing the third person, but bringing in third person, he is only escaping from the fact of himself. Because the fact
can you give an example here, sir?
Yeah. So the fact is that he is looking at his own images, but he is claiming that he is looking at the other person. So that is the escape he is having from himself.
Can you give an example here, sir? Suppose you set a dog's tail on fire.
Yeah.
What it does, it runs away, thinking, if he runs away, it will go away from the fire. But his tail itself is on fire.
Yeah.
So, so when we
it cannot escape.
Observer is
it cannot escape. That's right.
It cannot escape.
Yeah. That's right.
Kishore sir. Similarly, most of the JK members, including myself, I think all the time that I understood all the concepts of JK. Though I understood wrongly, I'm in assumption that I understood rightly. And I don't even dare to ask others whether my understanding is right or not. So it is our duty to know whether I understood observer is observed in a right way or no. I should make clarity from people like you. Similarly, other concepts like what is and other things which are very fundamentally important to understand total. I request you again and again in every class to ponder on these things until everyone understands. You should also tell it in a simple language, sir. More simple language, if possible, with some example also. Because
my attempt is always that, but then sometimes you cannot simplify the matter beyond a point because then
right,
it appears quite ridiculous.
Example, I tell you, if you randomly ask any particular person in this group, what you understand by what is, let two or three people reply, you will find the difference between their understanding.
Of course.
So why it is happening? Why it is happening even after attending so many Zoom meetings that we have to question ourselves.
No, that's mainly because I think even if people don't clearly understand something, they are shy of asking. They don't ask, and while all the time I keep on saying that unless you ask, the things will not get clarified. Because I may speak from my own understanding, but then I'm not sure whether that is being captured or grasped by the listeners. So that will become clear only when the listeners ask questions. So from the questions, we can find out where, how far they have understood and where the things need further clarification. So then,
sometimes you might be expressing the same thing in different words.
No, that is okay. What we are saying is that because meaning is not just the meaning of the words, but as you listen to the other person, what is the sound, the meaning that sounds out of that conversation. So which is not actually the meaning of the words, but whatever meaning that is behind those words. I mean, as one senses that meaning, then one can speak on that basis. But unless a person asks questions, we won't know. No. So what is the difficulty of this thing?
See, now I had looked at observer is the observed in a different way. It's only between me and my mind. No third person.
That's right. I mean, even if we bring the third person, finally it amounts to me and my thoughts and my conditioning. So that only.
I wanted to ask. I raised this in the morning also. He speaks about two types of learning. So one is the usual accumulative type of learning, which we undergo through our colleges and professional. And he speaks of another kind of learning. So can you explain this difference and what this other type of learning entails? And what is needed?
That's right.
Say someone who is interested in that kind of learning.
Because you see, in one kind of learning, the learning with which we are familiar, we are constantly accumulating knowledge and then acting on the basis of that knowledge. And if we are able to act the way we would like to act, then we say that yes, we understand that thing. Now the same thing if we employ in understanding ourselves, right? Ourselves means whatever is happening within us. That is what we consider as ourselves. So what is happening within us is all kinds of psychological reactions, all kinds of sensations, emotions, all kinds of thoughts, images, ideas, opinions, all that conditioning we call. So that we want to understand, right? And in order to understand that, we say that yes, we have to learn about it. Now, if we employ the same method of learning, which means that we start observing all that content and we start gathering knowledge about it, right? And when we gather knowledge about it, then on the basis of that knowledge, we try to deal with those things. And if we are able to deal with them with the desired result, then we say that now we understand it and we know what it is and how to go about it. Right? But if we are not able to have the desired results, then we say, I don't understand. So we further go on gathering knowledge. I mean, the same method as
so the moment we get into the same method of gathering knowledge, it becomes the same kind of knowledge. It becomes accumulative.
Yeah, accumulative.
How is one? Yeah.
No. That is what I am saying. I mean, you have to be just patiently listen, because I have not finished. I'm just exploring. I'm just telling you what happens if you employ the same method of learning into this field also, which is learning about oneself. Right. So I have not yet completed the to explore what happens. I'm just telling you that if we employ the same method, we end up in gathering a lot of knowledge about our reactions, about images, our opinions, our this and that, right? Now, what happens to that knowledge? Now, that knowledge becomes the additional content of our consciousness, which means that I wanted to understand the contents of my consciousness, and in learning about that content, right, I have added more content. Now, if I am adding more content, that means then I have to learn about that added content also, because if I want to learn about myself completely, that means I must understand the whole content of my consciousness, right? So if I have understood the whole content of my consciousness, then I can say that yes, now I understand myself. But here what is happening is that in the very attempt to understand the content of consciousness, I am making more and more additions to that content. That means I am generating more and more content, because whatever knowledge I have gathered, that becomes additional content of the consciousness. And since now the content of consciousness has increased, that means I have not completely yet understood the consciousness, because there is a additional content. So I have to understand that again. And in order to understand that, again I gather knowledge, and again that becomes further addition. So in the very attempt to understand myself, I am making more and more addition to that content, and therefore at no point I can say to myself, I understand myself completely, because there will be always an ununderstood part. So therefore, that is one aspect of, that is one difficulty if we employ the same method of learning to understand our inner situation. Now another difficulty is this, that even if you gather a lot of knowledge about psychological reactions, those psychological reactions, you are still not free from them. At the most, you may learn to manage them. Like say, for example, if you study the anger by accumulating a lot of knowledge about anger, how it happens, and all the pros and cons and everything. So now you have almost the complete knowledge of the reaction of anger, right? And you can explain how a person gets angry and what he should do when he gets angry and so on. But are you really free from the reaction of anger? You are not. You can still get angry whenever there is a provocation, whenever there is a situation. But you say that although I get angry, I know how to deal with it, I know how to manage it, right? So one just ends up in the managing the psychological reactions to whatever extent possible, but one is not free from them. So if you are not free from the reaction of anger, how can we say that you understand anger? You cannot. So then understanding a psychological reaction means complete freedom from that psychological reaction. And the learning method, which is by accumulating knowledge, is incapable of bringing about that complete freedom from that reaction. And therefore, that learning fails on that count also. So these two factors indicate that the usual kind of accumulative learning is of no use as far as understanding one's psychological nature is concerned, understanding one's psychological content is concerned. So a different kind of learning is required, which we call as non-accumulative. So the learning should not accumulate any knowledge, otherwise it will become additional content. So without accumulating knowledge, is it possible to learn, right? So it is not only to not accumulate knowledge, but it is also that when you are learning about that thing, then in that very learning, that thing should come to its end, because only then the freedom is possible. If the reaction of anger, if one has learnt about reaction of anger completely, then that reaction must come to an end. It must subside. And not only subside, but if one has understood anger completely, then one will never be angry, because there is no such thing which can manifest as anger in that person. So which means that this is a completely different kind of action. In the first case, it is gathering, accumulating, and based on that accumulation we understand. But here we are not accumulating, but at the same time there is a dissipation. That means whatever is gathered, that is being dissipated. So whatever the elements we have gathered which are responsible for the reaction of anger, now those elements are getting dissipated due to our learning process, the different kind of learning. So if when all the elements responsible for a particular psychological reaction are dissipated, then that psychological reaction cannot arise at all. In spite of any provocation, external provocation, the psychological reaction cannot arise, because the elements, the factors which are responsible for that psychological reaction have all dissipated. So this is exactly a opposite kind of learning. One is accumulative while other is dissipative. One gathers knowledge and on the basis of knowledge acts, the other doesn't gather knowledge but simply lets that reaction come to its own end without making any contribution to it, without giving any continuity to it. So that is a different kind of learning. So now that learning is possible only by paying attention. That means one has to be first aware of that reaction, and then out of that awareness one attends that reaction, and through such attention that reaction lives its life and comes to its natural end. So that is the kind of learning. And so the interesting thing is that if you learn in the usual way, your experience is that whenever you learn something, you always find that there is much more to learn, right? So it is an unending process. That means you start learning by gathering knowledge. Whatever knowledge you gather, even after that, you find that there is still much more to gather. There is still much more to know. So there is no end to that learning process. But in this other kind of learning, right, when you are learning, right, eventually you come to a point when you have to say there is nothing to learn because you are not accumulating anything, but things are dissipating in this learning process. So whatever you are learning about, all the psychological content, right, now all that psychological content through this different kind of learning coming to its natural end, then there is no longer any content left, and therefore there is actually nothing to learn. So it's quite different. I mean, if you just put them together, you will find that they are quite opposite to each other. In fact, they are totally different. So this second kind of learning, which is a non-accumulative learning, nothing is being done about it. In the schools, colleges, we are only educating the students through the first kind of learning, that is gathering knowledge, using that knowledge, solving problems, and so on. But the other kind of learning is completely ignored. In fact, we are not even aware that there can be such a learning. But Krishnaji has pointed it out.
So the other kind of learning, it occurs in relationship.
Yes. I mean, because you are learning about your own psychological reactions. Now, these psychological reactions, they become visible when you interact with others. When you interact with other human beings, when you interact with other things, when you interact with various events or incidents that are happening around you, then through that interaction, these reactions are visible. So that is when you observe them.
So in essence, as I'm listening to you,
yeah,
I'm observing how I am interacting with you.
Yes.
And I'm also, as I'm listening to you, and as this is happening, there is no memory or anything that is being, if it is being completely understood or whatever it produces ends at that point, then the learning has occurred and that's it.
Yes, you have understood something, you have got that point, and then that's the end of it.
Yes.
So may I add, sir?
Yeah.
So about anger, I think anger is a spontaneous reaction to a situation. Nothing wrong in that. But if we learn to be watchful, we might be able to end anger then and there, depending on the degree of our watchfulness.
Yeah.
So we don't need to really learn to stop the instantaneous reaction of anger. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, we are talking about different kind of learning. I mean, the kind of learning you are saying is still gives a sense of usual kind of learning, that we don't have to learn about it. But kind of learning we have talked about is a different kind of learning. And that learning happens through observation and so on. So whatever you are saying is that moment itself, the anger can go. So whatever that is happening there at that time, that is what the other kind of learning we are talking about. It is just putting the matter in a different way. Yeah.
So the process by which I am listening of the word and the actual phenomenon or process behind that word.
Yeah.
And the feeling that arises if that word is used.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, you're in essence, you're directly dealing with things as they are. And the fact that filters or words or feelings or thoughts are intervening, all those are being watched, and it helps you to apprehend what is happening directly.
Yes.
Okay.
May I ask a question, sir?
Yes, please go ahead.
Two questions, but both are very small.
Yeah.
One is why JK used the word living, like he said, jealousy, anger, all these things, fear, they are living in us. He used the word living in us. That's the first question. Second question is, this is my own question, like, is it the one thing appearing as anger at one time, fear as another time, jealousy as another time, like Dasavatar Kamalas acts in different ways? Is it the one thing coming out as a different this thing? This is two questions, sir.
Yeah. I think the second question we will take first, because it is the same entity which is reacting in different ways. It is the same self-centeredness or the ego or the me, which is reacting sometimes in terms of anger, sometimes in terms of fear, sometimes as jealousy, and so on. So all these reactions, although we look at them as different reactions, they have the same common source, which is the self-centeredness, the ego, and that is expressing itself through these different reactions. So that is why we said in the morning that one way is to understand each reaction as it arises and then let it end, or let it come to its natural end. Or the other thing is that if you understand the central issue, which is the ego or the me, then the whole thing comes to an end. So then you don't have to go by each reaction as it arises. And to understand that central issue is understanding this statement, which is observer is the observed. So once that is understood, this word in quotes, because we still don't clearly understand the meaning of that word understand, what is implied. So it's we can say that a kind of perception, where when it is perceived that observer is observed, and therefore this division coming to an end, so which means that the observer is coming to an end. So once the observer is not there, then there is no question of any reaction, and therefore we don't have to watch each reaction separately and try to understand them and then try to end it and so on. So all that becomes unnecessary.
Right, sir. Yes.
So now the first part of the question is, we are saying that these reactions are something living. These are not inanimate things like a computer thinks. So those thoughts of the computer, they are inanimate things. There is no life, because there is no sensation, there is no subsiding or growing. It just remains what it is. But in our case, all these content, it has sensation, it has feeling, and it has also the information or the knowledge. So it's all the combination of all this, and therefore in that sense it is living, because it can grow or it can subside also. I mean, a person's anger can grow, the intensity can grow, and then a person may burst out of that anger. But also it can subside. That means that sensation slowly dying, and then the person no longer feeling that reaction. So in that sense, it is a living thing. And if it is a living thing, you can add to its life. So when thought interferes with these reactions, it is actually adding to their life, which means that it is giving continuity to those reactions. So they are able to survive much longer than what otherwise they would have survived. And therefore we are saying that, is it possible for thought to be silent so that it doesn't contribute to these reactions? Then these reactions left to themselves, they will come to their natural end, because they have a limited energy in the form of sensation and feelings. There is a limited energy, and that energy will get exhausted, and then they will come to their natural end. Right? So that is what we mean by these reactions as living entities.
But thought is only words, no sir? Thought is only language. How can it influence so much on us?
Thought is not just words, languages, it is also images.
Right.
It is also ideas, opinions.
Yeah, images and opinions also coming out in form of words only, no sir? Suppose I have an image on you, oh, he is a very good person.
Yes.
So without those, he is a very good person, without those words, I cannot form an image, sir.
No, wait, I can have an image for which I have no word, because I may have seen that object for the first time. So there is no label for that. If I see some strange object, right, then I have the image of that object in my brain, which I have received through my eyes. But I have not labeled that image as yet, because I don't know what it is. So there is no word corresponding to that image, but still I have the image. Similarly, we have sense of various kinds of tastes, right? But all taste we cannot describe in words. And even if we describe them in words, for the person who has not tasted it, those words mean nothing. Because if he has tasted sweetness, right, and then we tell him that this is sweet, then he understands. But if he has not tasted sweetness at all, so he just doesn't know what that taste of sweetness is, and then we tell him that this is sweet. So that word doesn't mean anything to him. Right?
So, and thought is not just words, na? It gets converted into emotion also.
Yeah. So the thought has a lot of content which may not be represented in terms of words. It can be images. Then sometimes you have very strange kinds of feelings which you are unable to express in words. You say, yeah, it's different, but I can't put it in words, and so on. So words is one of the contents of the thought, but it is not the whole. There are a lot of different kinds of contents. Then there are sounds also, various kinds of sounds, and various kinds of senses of touches, the texture, texture and all that. So there is quite a lot of content, not expressible through words.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, may I come in, sir? Sai.
Yeah, please. Yeah, Sai.
Sir, with all this information which you have shared, so this now converts into accumulation.
Yeah.
So tomorrow when I get up in the morning,
yeah,
I will rehearse or I will recollect what Kishorji has said.
Yeah.
Right, sir. So with all this information, how do I live my life? So what is that Kishorji or K is actually trying to tell me or teach me? With all this information, I might act in a different way. There is always a dissection of one particular problem. Suppose if you, with all those previous questions which we have discussed, last 3 to 4 questions previously, suppose if there is only one central unit which is taking different forms in the form of anger, desire, etc., etc. So you are asking me to watch every part of it, or understand that central unit, and you can end it there. But when I get up in the morning, I always feel like, who is talking? Like, is that central unit coming out, and is that the thought which is always talking, or do I exist, or is the or the images themselves talking and in the form of words and expressions? So can I consider this as a step where what is necessary to be done at that particular situation? Suppose I am doing one particular job and that job needs some attention. If I can give that some attention, which is precisely required to get that job done, so can I say that I am not using my thought?
No, of course, in getting that job done, if knowledge is required, then you are using your thought, right? But what thought to use, how to use, and all that thing, that you will understand by paying attention, by learning about what you want to do, and then only you will know what kind of knowledge is required and what kind of action is required, and then you will be able to do that. So knowledge is used as per your understanding of the situation, right? But if you are not paying attention, then that knowledge is telling you what to do and what not to do, which may not be correct, which may not meet the problem, right? If a person may have knowledge, but if he doesn't know where it is applicable and how it can be applied, then it is of no use to him. So like in mathematics, some students used to do, they used to memorize certain equations or formulas, right? But then they didn't know where that formula is applicable, where they can apply it, where they cannot apply it, and how to apply it. So in spite of knowing the formula, they simply were unable to use it. So what we are doing here in these dialogues is, our emphasis is not on the description which I am giving. So if you are merely gathering knowledge from whatever we are discussing and then trying to act as per that knowledge, then I think you are missing the major point. Because through these conversations, we are actually attempting to understand the issue that is presented to us. And if we are actually trying to understand that issue, which means that we are using our brain. And if we are using our brain, then there is a possibility of the brain opening up. So suddenly when some point is being explained and you realize that, oh, this is how it is. So there is some kind of understanding that happens. And then there is also a kind of joy about that understanding. Oh, this point has been understood properly. So that much is enough, because then, which means that the brain has opened up and it has seen the point, it has understood it, and that's what that is expected. So next day you may not remember what was said and all those things, but yet the brain has opened up, and that awakened brain, to whatever extent it might have been awakened, that awakened brain is now more capable to deal with the situations in life than it was before. So that is what is expected through these conversations. But if you are merely taking down notes and just gathering knowledge and all this thing, and without doing the kind of brain work that is actually required, then you are missing quite a lot.
So if I understand you, knowledge has its place where required.
Yes.
But if we learn to look, we can very well forget what JK said or what Kishorji said and just look.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, sir.
Now the question comes in my mind about accumulative knowledge and cumulative. I mean, accumulative, non-accumulative learning, that's also useful in operational or professional or physical world. Means we are like making a demarcation that non-accumulative for psychological, accumulative for physical world. But the way we are discussing, I just beginning to realize that non-accumulative type learning can also in physical or professional world. I mean, out of the box.
Yeah, it can be useful, because even in the physical world, we are working with other human beings. And whenever other human beings are involved, there is always this problem of relationship. How you relate with your employees, how you relate with your bosses, how you relate with the other staff. And in that relationship, then this non-accumulative learning is also very much necessary in order to understand the situation. Because you may be in a hurt state, and with that hurt state, you cannot do your job properly. Suppose a teacher is scolded by the principal, and so the teacher is in the hurt state of mind. Now with that state of mind, he cannot go to a class and start teaching the students. So a non-accumulative learning has to happen there, so that that hurt is gone, and then he can do his job properly. So there is no such distinction that this kind of learning only here and there, but wherever this psychological field is functioning, and I think wherever human beings are there, it is also there, this thing. So in the problem of relationship, so not only at the working place, but also at home, and also at wherever you are getting educated and so on. So there it is absolutely necessary, this other kind of learning.
Yes. If I say that our brain should work like a computer by keeping away the psychological mind, will it be correct?
No, that's not correct. Because our brain is not a computer. The capacity like computer is just one function of the brain. But our brain has a lot of other potential. I mean, our brain has the potential to be aware, to pay attention, right? That is also the potential of our brain. So what we are saying is that we are not trying to isolate or separate thought from emotions and sensations, right? But by bringing in this additional faculty of paying attention or awareness, right, the sensations and emotions are not getting attached to thought, and that's all. So thought functions in a way in which it is supposed to function. It has its proper place, and that's the end of it. And the emotions and sensations, they also have their place, because they are the response to a given situation, and so they also have their proper place. But then this awareness or attention, it gives a different dimension to our living. Then it doesn't remain limited only to thoughts and emotions, but then it also opens up a completely new kind of understanding, a new possibility of perceiving things, which is not in terms of knowledge. Because if our brain functions only according to the way the computer functions, then it is endlessly involved in gathering knowledge and acting on the basis of the knowledge, and understanding everything in terms of knowledge. Then this different kind of learning which we have talked about, then it is not possible for the brain. So when we talk about different kind of learning, then that learning is not possible for a computer. A computer cannot learn in that different way. So only human brain can learn. So in that sense, it is quite different, human brain. And one part of it can function like a computer, but then there are lots of other potentials of the brain which need to be opened up, or which need to be awakened.
Does it mean that you require some sort of switch on and switch off? Like
no, actually,
you are discussing and keeping a psychological mind away. You gather the information, and at that time when you are gathering the information, you keep the psychological mind off and then make it on.
No, I think when you are putting it in that way, it actually almost sounds that that is what one is required to do. So there is some element of deliberation or doing it deliberately. But this has to happen through attention and awareness. So there you don't have to do it. That means the very attention tells you where knowledge is required, and therefore the thought is used, and so on. But there is no such deliberation. I think because the way you are putting it, it almost sounds that one has to program oneself in such a way that whenever it is required, you activate the thought, and when it is not required, you just let it lie quiet, and then keep the emotions and sensations separate, and then that will resolve the problem. The thing is over. So it almost sounds like that, but it is not like that, because then where is the place for awareness and attention? Then which means that in the realm of knowledge itself, you have resolved the problem by keeping the two things separate, and then that's the end of it. And then what is the unfoldment and what is the other aspects of life? So does that mean that one has to just do that and then exist eternally in that state only? So that looks quite absurd. So it's not actually like that. What is required is the unfoldment of the other potentials of the human brain, and as they unfold, the previously existing potentials, they fall in their right place. So it's not that new potential is putting them to their right place, but as the new potential opens up, the earlier potentials, they fall in their right place. So they function only when it is necessary to function. Otherwise, they are not. So I think in that sense we are speaking about.
That whatever I just expressed, that should happen automatically, and that we can call it as awareness.
No, even that way of putting it doesn't sound correct, because we may wait very long time and it may not happen automatically.
But sir, all this dialogue and seminar is going on. We are trying to learn it.
Yeah, that's right.
By learning that process, we are going to adopt that method or trick.
No, exactly. That is the whole point. See, there is no method or things to be adopted.
No, not method, but it is trying to understand what you are saying.
Yeah.
And that understanding, it sounds like that. That is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
In our technical language.
Yeah. But actually it is not like that. It is a little bit different. It is because if we try to put it in that way, it almost becomes a kind of method or system, and which we have to just follow, or either we have to wait for it to automatically happen, or we have to make it happen, and so on. But both these approaches are not correct, because there is a lot of thing which is amiss in that. And so
sir, that is okay, but it seems that the main problem is that our psychological brain is always obstructing, is trying to create the problem in our awareness.
That's right.
Or joy or happiness. So I am trying to say that how to keep it away and make you happy. So that seems to be the point.
Yeah, that's right. But
okay, sir.
Yeah.
What
I was saying, but thinking in that way is still amounts to discovering a method and using it to make it happen, which is still very much the activity within the field of knowledge. I mean, if it comes through attention or through that choiceless awareness, then there is no system, method, nothing. I mean, one even doesn't speak in terms of say using it or making it happen and all those things, but by simply being aware, things fall in their right places. So, but from that, if we immediately conclude that that means it happens automatically, then that is the inference drawn by the thinker functioning in the field of knowledge. And so, and if we just go by that, then it doesn't sound correct. It has to have this full context in which it has arisen. And if we have the full context, then we don't need that conclusion. We can as well give it up.
Right, sir. Krishnaji himself said it is very arduous and we have to be working on it continuously, effortlessly.
Not working, no, sir. You cannot work it. That is the problem, no. And it cannot happen automatically also. So that is the point. What I cannot explain it. I can understand what you mean to say, but what you are talking about, that is, for an ordinary person, it is very difficult, no? God. How it can happen? I mean, some kind of, maybe a person like you have, I cannot say that you have achieved, but it has happened to you. So that happening should be possible with me also. It is like that.
Actually, that endeavor has to be done. I mean, one has to one has to put one's energy to learn that, to
no, we cannot
understand
say
that.
that we are for to put the energy.
Yeah, that's right.
You
that's
cannot
right.
say no?
Yeah.
That you can put the energy. That is also wrong.
Okay.
Sir Kishorji.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Will there be any observable physical changes when transformation is taking place? In physical changes.
Yeah. There will be physical changes also, but physical changes will take a long time to happen. Because what happens is that whatever change has happened inwardly, the body has to adjust to that. Body has to adapt to those changes, and only when it has adapted completely with those changes, then the change in the body will be also visible. But until then, we may not see any significant change in the appearance of a person or in his body.
What type of changes we can observe like that?
Difficult to say, because most of the changes which are observable are also possible to create them by other means without this kind of enquiry or realization. So it's very difficult to say, because people can have those kinds of changes. Suppose if you say that yes, that fellow's skin will be very clean, then he will be radiating and all those things. But I have seen a person who was exactly like that, very impressive personality, and yet nothing spiritually. So it's quite difficult. So I think we shouldn't go by outward appearance. But I think if we are sensitive enough, we can sense the psychological atmosphere around the person. And the judgment based on that may be closer than the judgment based on just the outward appearance. So Krishnaji always had that kind of presence around him wherever he went. And any sensitive person will never miss it. And when he used to meet the people, then one cannot fail to notice the kind of affection and love with which he is meeting the person. So that is definitely a sign of a person changing. But mere outward appearance can be deceptive many times.
Sir, like 1 or 2 points are there.
Yeah.
I just want to share in with the whatever that's been happening here.
Yeah.
Now just now you are mentioning about the sensitivity. You know?
Yeah.
Like when we read Krishna's book extensively, says about like not getting touched by the sorrow and in our lives, and that means when you are touched by them, automatically mind starts asking some questions.
Yeah.
If that sensitivity is there.
Yeah.
If just merely getting on to the function of it.
Yeah.
The basic formula of it. I think there is always will be the disconnect will be there. If one is touched by maybe the sorrow, the misery, the confusion, conflict in one's life, or seeing in the world or whatever it is, then I think then the next step is all this the how to go about it, observe all those things. That's one point. Other point is like he says, when man lost touch with the nature, he touch with the relationship itself. Nature is an integral part of his teaching. So he says like, we don't look at the skies, and that means like this is the background he gives, sir. So then the rest of the part comes later on. I feel these are the prerequisites, or like like somebody is asking, how to go about that. These are the few things he keeps on saying in the very beginning itself. That we stop bothering about these things and we in our humdrum routine life and goals and achievements. We're always busy in that. So he always sets tone that way, and then he goes into what to be done and all that. So I think that's kind of a mindset, and sensitivity is also important. Huh?
Yeah.
As one question is a small question.
Yeah.
That is, yesterday you were referring to in the art of living.
Yeah.
You said about the sense of proportion.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Yeah.
And also you said about precision and
Yeah.
especially the art of proportion.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful, sir.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to hear from you. Is it anywhere he mentioned all those things, sir, or is it your understanding you have arrived at?
No, he has mentioned it. When he is describing what is beauty, right, or when he is explaining what is art, and then he is saying it, he is actually using the words in right proportion, things in their right places. He has actually said it. So I'm just quoting him. I'm not using my words. I'm just quoting him in that context.
Specific, remember, like where he's mentioned, or it's in the commentaries on living or somewhere?
No, I think he has mentioned it in various ways. Probably, I think you can just go through the material which I have given to you. Maybe one of the chapters may have this. And if it doesn't have, then I can, because we may have some workshop on creativity also. Maybe in the next series, we'll have a workshop on creativity.
Yes, I heard you mentioned this, and that
Yeah.
really struck me
Yeah,
so
yeah.
well. So it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because I per se didn't come across that.
Yeah, yeah.
Life having sense of proportion, that's so
Yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
Can keep on at themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether one is getting astray or one is because any activity
Yeah.
is maybe in the intellectual level. That's
Yeah,
a check
yeah.
for oneself.
Yeah, that's right. Because our life is very disproportionate, because certain things are getting tremendous importance while certain things are totally neglected. So it's quite a disproportionate way of living.
Yeah.
So
This is a kind of check and balance one can keep on
yeah,
oneself.
yeah.
If one is carrying away so much, neglecting the
Yeah,
other things.
yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, that is the important work, sir.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah,
That's all, sir. Okay,
yeah,
sir. Thank you, sir.
yeah, yeah.
Sir, in a bucket, if you put some oranges or apples, bananas,
Yeah.
You can when you put your hand, you will find only those things. Obviously,
Yeah,
you
that's
don't
right.
see some
Yeah,
other things.
yeah,
In the same way, is me, Shankar Rao, or any
yeah,
self for that matter, any person,
yeah,
are we all made of these ideas, images,
yeah, yeah,
opinions,
yeah,
anger, fear, jealousy?
yeah, yeah.
That is the reason that when I talk or in my expressions, only those things are coming out, sir.
Yeah, that's right. Because whatever is within, only that will come out. Whatever is not there, how can it come out? There is no question of it coming out.
So, okay, that is fine. Then when I start observing these things, my own images and all that,
Yeah.
so the one which is observing, that is also there inside this, inside the bucket?
No, that is exactly. If the observer is observing, then that observer is very much in the bucket. And whatever he is observing, that is also very much in the bucket, right? But when we are talking about observing without the observer, which means
exactly,
then it's a different quality of observation. Now that quality of observation is not the part of the bucket. It's something totally different. And that is where the observer is not in the picture at all, in the sense that that observation is not the activity of the observer. It is something quite different.
The intelligence is using the word.
We call it as say awareness, and out of that awareness, whatever understanding happens, that is the intelligence, and so on. So it's different. It's not part of the bucket.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, can we say that observing without the observer, and the sensitivity required to do that, that is the trigger of the enquiry, that triggers the enquiry, and change would happen when this realization that observer is the observed, that realization in whatever way it happens, whatever way it comes about, that is the starting point of any change. Can we really say that, sir?
Yeah, that's right. Because the realization that observer is the observed amounts to stepping out of that field of consciousness. Although the content hasn't completely ended, yet the stepping out has happened. So then content will take its own time to come to its natural end. But once you have stepped out, that is not your concern, that when it will come to an end. But then there is no further contribution to it. So therefore that limited content will take some limited time. But that limited time we cannot measure because we are simply not, we simply don't know how much that content and over what period of time, because it's a millions of years of gathering, the accumulation. So it is not just what we have accumulated post birth, but whatever that has been accumulated even before that. So all that is the content. And so we don't know how long it may take, but then it doesn't matter, because once a person has already stepped out of this whole field of consciousness, then he is free to live life according to that freedom. So that is how it is. So the whole thing begins by through ordinary observation, even this kind of observation which we are used to. Because there is, we have said that there is this instinct to know. I mean, there is always this instinct in every living entity, the instinct to know. Now, know not in intellectual terms, but because even a non-thinking living being is also constantly learning, right? It is learning to survive, and therefore it learns to move, it learns to correlate, it learns to recognize objects. So it learns to gather, store, and respond from that stored. So all that thing is learning actually. So actually to live means to learn. You cannot separate the two. And when it comes to human stage, a different kind of learning becomes necessary. And through that different kind of learning, a different way of living opens up. And that goes on. So the living as a movement goes on, and living is learning. There is no separation between the two. Because if one doesn't learn, one cannot survive. And as one is learning, then through that, inquiry is part of that learning. And through inquiry, then coming upon these truths, that observer is the observed, and so on. And then stepping out of the consciousness. And then a different kind of life. So what is learning in that different kind of life, we don't know unless we are actually in it. But life as a movement, and Krishnaji also talks of learning as a movement. So as long as you are moving, that is fine. And he also talks about there is nothing to learn, because there is nothing to accumulate, there is nothing to gather.
So is ordinary observation, as you termed it just now, the first step and the last step, or does it change along the way?
Yeah, ordinary observation is the observation through which you are gathering knowledge, information, and then acting on the basis of that, right? So that is certainly not the last step, although it is the first step. Probably there is no such thing as last step, in the sense that there is no end to learning. It's movement, and that movement.
So the first step is the last step?
No. I think we are applying a statement in a wrong context here. That first step is the last step is used in a different context than what we are talking about now. What we have said that the usual learning is learning in terms of knowledge. But when it comes to human stage and we have to learn about our psychological nature, then a different kind of learning is required, right? Which is non-accumulative and so on. But this first step is the last step. This is used in a completely different context, particularly when Krishnaji is talking about freedom. Then he says that the very first step has to be in the freedom. And once you have taken that step into the freedom, then there is no need for second or further steps because you are already out. Which means that when you are stepping out of the stream of consciousness, right, then the very first step is the last step in that case. Because once you have stepped out of the stream of consciousness, there is no need for the second or third or fourth. So that very step turns out to be also the last step. So in that context,
but can this come through ordinary observation?
Yeah, ordinary observation is happening in terms of gathering knowledge and all these things. So what is happening is that ordinary observation is keeping that instinct to learn alive. That's all. So as long as that instinct to learn is alive, right, it will also learn that where this gathering of knowledge is not useful, where it is hindrance, right? But the instinct to learn itself is not alive, then probably nothing can happen. The person may not learn anything, and therefore he may not also be able to survive. So this usual kind of learning in terms of knowledge, probably it is playing a role of keeping that instinct alive, because the person who is learning in terms of knowledge, he is also wanting to gather more and more knowledge. The more he learns, the more there is to learn, and then he is actually pulled in that direction because his curiosity further increases, and then he has his own excitement even in that kind of learning. So it only helps to keep that instinct alive. And as long as the instinct is alive, it is always possible to turn it to this different kind of learning. But if it is not alive at all, suppose you lose all the interest in learning, right? Then you won't even inquire. You won't be bothered about what is happening to you or whether you are learning or not learning, because we see sometimes we do happen to be in that state of mind when we seem to be totally disinterested in everything. We just don't know what to do, because whatever we lay our hands upon, we don't feel like doing it. We find that we are not interested in it. And so finally, we just feel lost. So that means that instinct to learn is almost completely buried. It's not functioning. But
does this mean that self-understanding cannot come through ordinary observation?
Yeah, certainly it cannot come through ordinary observation, because ordinary observation will only add to the self, but it will not bring the understanding.
So that means you are referring to gathering knowledge, no, rather than...
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
I want to ask some question.
Yeah.
Sir, when I look at you, with images, you are labeling me as self, and you are labeling me all bad things, like I am devil and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
When the same person, I look at you without images, you are labeling me as intelligence, God, and all that. How injustice is that, sir? In small change, the whole thing is becoming villain to hero.
No, we are not labeling at all anything.
No. I mean,
so
that is how we are.
No, what you are trying to imply is that when you are observing, labeling, and living a conditioned life, then you are a destructive human being, right? But if you are not doing that, then you are a glorified human being. But that is not so, because the first thing is, okay, if I am living a conditioned life with labeling and with all kinds of conflicts and all these things, then yes, I am really a devil, right? But not doing that doesn't necessarily imply that therefore I am a divine being, because I may simply not do it out of laziness, out of sluggishness, out of insensitivity, out of disinterest, right? I may not do those things, and yet then how can I call myself as the divine being? Because I have no divine qualities in me. So that other part is not correct. The first part is all right. When I am living a conditioned life, then yes, I am living like a devil. But if I am not, say, if I am abstaining from that kind of living, it doesn't imply that I am a divine being, because there are no divine qualities.
Shankarji, is it really important to be divine?
No. Just for the sake of using the word divine to make people understand, because JK says intelligence and all that. How come the same person become intelligence just by removing the image? That's what I mean. So one more small question. We categorized fear, anger, jealous, and similar things under living things, living in us. So behind every image, is it mandatory to have a fear or something, sir? Without with these things, can there be no image or idea or opinion?
See, all the images stored on the hard disk, they don't have fear, pleasure, or any of that psychological content, right? We have so many images stored on the hard disk, and there is no such psychological content in them. So it is possible to have images without any psychological content.
Because in what is he wants us to watch?
Fear is necessary, no? If a tiger chases you, we should run.
Yeah.
It's a different context, Vijayji.
Yeah.
Okay. So what my question is,
desire, is it the desire that actually makes a conflict when you're actually referring to an image and you wanted to have it again?
Yeah.
Right, sir?
That's right.
No, an image is identification.
Yeah, identification. That is what to say, when we identify with an image of an object, then a desire is born for that object, and we want to possess that object. So, but this doesn't happen in case of a computer, because there is no identification process at all. The computer just takes it as an image, and there is no psychological content in it. So there is no identification, there is no self-awareness, there is no sensation or feeling, and so on. So it is just the image, and based on that image, according to its program, it will process them, and it will act whatever comes out of that processing. So it's a totally mechanical way of living. But here, in case of us, there are these sensations, feelings, emotions, there is desire, and such kinds of content, which gives a different color or different nature to these contents created by thought.
Thank you,
All
sir.
these are various manifestation of thought only, no? It is thought expressed in different ways.
Yeah, thought combined with the psychological content, because it is not just the thought. The thought operating in the psychological field, generating the psychological content, and then that content also acquires the mechanical quality because of thought. And so we say that we are even psychologically programmed.
So fear is thought, desire is thought, all these emotions are thought only.
Yeah. No, don't say thought only, because if you say thought only, then computer doesn't have the fear, desire, and all those things, right? But it has thought. So we have to be very careful.
Human beings, sir.
Yeah, no. So no. But when we say thought, right? So we have to be very careful to clearly state so that we don't mistake on it, because we do work with computers and machines, and so a comparison will come to our mind.
I was talking about human beings.
Yeah, talking about human beings only, but the same human beings are also using computers. So computers are just like their extended intellect. So what we can say is that the thought functioning in the psychological realm creates the psychological content. And when the psychological content is created by thought, that content also has the property of thought, which is the mechanical property, repetitive, mechanical, and so on. So in that sense, then we also get programmed psychologically, which means that when we will get provoked in what way gets determined by this psychological programming. And that we experience in our daily life, because we know when certain person is going to get angry, or how to make him angry, or how to make a certain person react in a certain way, right? When you want to extract some favor from that person, then you know how to approach him, how to behave, and how to get it done. So all that is the result of this programming.
So, sir, thought is a response to memory which comes from knowledge, no?
Yeah.
So it expresses itself in different ways, like fear, desire, whatever.
No, but for fear and desire, the sensation and feelings, the combination of thought with sensation and feeling is absolutely necessary, without which the desire cannot be there. In fact, whenever Krishnaji describes how the desire arises, he always says that contact, sensation, and then thought creating an image around that sensation. And then the desire is born. So desire is not just an empty thought, like a thought in the computer. Desire is a thought combined with the sensation. And that sensation then acquires a mechanical quality because of its association with the thought. Otherwise, otherwise the sensation just arises and falls. It doesn't continue. Yeah, you can observe it. It doesn't continue indefinitely, but thought makes it continue indefinitely. Thought gives it continuity.
Sir, Neha here. I just wanted to ask a question around. So, I mean, what you expanded on earlier, where you said that when there is a perception of observer is the observed, one steps out of the stream of consciousness. And also in the morning, we were talking about how it is not, I mean, at least from all these workshops and all, one has a sense of this, of the observer is observed. It is not seen entirely. But there is some even if it's in intellectual understanding, there is a sense which, and would it be right to say that once one has a sense of this, one's observation then is no longer concerned with the contents of what comes up, whether it be greed, whatever the contents are. But the observation is now very keenly aware and sensitive to the interference of the observer, as and when that comes up.
That's right. That's right.
So and so in that sense, the contents are given a free hand to express and die or dissipate, as you said. And through such observation, then the actual understanding of the nature of or the falseness of the self begins to unfold.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Correct.
Sir, I have a question. That you just now spoke about the process in which desire is born. And if one observes that almost all endeavor of the living is somewhere conceived in this format, right from being born. That it is this desire which drives through all the time.
Right.
Now, in this enquiry or in this approach to know oneself, what actually happens? What happens is does this desire, which is always there as a life force in the form of a more conditioned form, which has been driving me so far, and here there seems to be, I cannot use the term desire, but that what Dr. Pavan has spoken before, like earnestness or interest. So what actually keeps that? Because we said that this is not a process, it is a movement. So that the actual learning in that sense, it is we don't see an end in that sense. So it seems to be a living quality overall. So that shift from a way of existence where in everything desire is conceived and followed through, and in this line of inquiry, how does one approach that, sir?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so far the desire has been the driving energy of our life, because desire makes us move, desire makes us act, desire makes us do things, and so that is the driving or motivating force or energy in our life, right? But then a life driven by desire ends up in conflict and suffering. And then when we do inquire into all this process, right, and we start understanding the nature of desire and so on, right, then the desire is no longer the driving energy. Right? Our intention or our intent to understand the life and the movement of living, that drives us, and then we act accordingly. And if we are able to go further with the kind of awareness and attention we have been talking about, right, then when the content of consciousness, or when we have stepped out of that field of consciousness, right, so at that point a totally different kind of energy comes into being, which is not the energy of desire, but which is Krishnaji calls it as the energy of compassion. So then that energy of compassion becomes the driving energy in our life, because there has to be driving energy. Without that, the life cannot keep on moving. So initially we had desire as the driving force or driving energy, but now this compassion is the driving energy.
So that, does this mean that desire, any action from is a reaction, and what comes from observation is pure action?
Yes, I mean, because action is not a reaction to something, because you see, the interesting thing is the action of desire depends on the external situation, external object, external circumstances, and as the external circumstances vary, the action of desire will also vary. So that is why we respond in different ways in different situations, right? Sometimes we feel great about that person, then sometimes we hate that person, sometimes we love that person, and so all our interaction keeps on changing, because that is based on the environment or the circumstances. But the action of compassion is not based on circumstances. A compassionate action remains a compassionate action. If that were a reaction to the outer circumstances, then that would have changed according to outer circumstances. So in that sense, what you are saying is that the action motivated by desire is not an actual action, it is a reaction. So that is correct.
Right, sir. Right, yes. Yeah. That's what I want to say.
But the action, the real action is the action which emerges from compassion, because that action is not a reaction to the external situation. Whatever may be the external situation, the nature of that action will be always the compassionate. It will be always from compassion. So it is not a reaction, it is action.
And self-understanding.
Yeah.
Compassion and self-understanding.
Yeah.
Sir, Rajsekhar here. One quick question on this.
Yeah.
Sir, at some places, cases, sir, what is wrong with desire?
Yeah.
And he says, why does thought continuity to desire?
Yeah.
And he seems to be quite, quite different, or rather, he seems to be having a different take on desire as against the traditional approach.
Yeah,
That
that's
desire
right.
is ugly, desire is that, and all of that.
Yeah.
It seems like desire has a place in life. I'm not saying, I do not know. So if you can just throw some light, that would be great.
Yeah. No, there is nothing wrong with desire. But action which is based on desire can lead to conflict, and then from conflict to suffering. Right? But desire as an energy, there is nothing wrong. It is just an energy. But because that is combined with thought, right? If you just separate thought from that sensation, then the sensation is sensation. There is nothing wrong with it. In fact, we must have sensations. Otherwise, we won't be alive at all. So there is nothing wrong with it. It is only when the thought identifies itself with that and then goes after the object which it thinks was responsible for that sensation, right? Then it wants to possess that object. It wants to possess it and re-experience that sensation by possessing it. So that is what is leading to conflict. But sensation by itself is not a problem at all. We have different sensations at different times, and they are always happening. So sensations, emotions, feelings, they are happening. They become a problem only when the thought interferes in them and then tries to act, to modify them, to give them continuity, and do whatever it wants to do with them. That is the problem. So desire by itself is not a problem as long as we are able to separate it from thought. But when you separate it from thought, then it is no longer desire. It just remains a sensation, the energy. And that energy then can be used in different ways. And it's a tremendous energy. The energy of desire, the energy content in desire is tremendous. At I think some place Krishnaji has compared it with the energy of a steam. So it is that potent.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just one other follow-up question there.
Yeah.
So when we say that desire in itself is energy, and energy in itself is not as much a problem, sometimes what happens is the sense of self seems to be so afraid and of this energy, as if it will be engulfed by it or it will be overwhelmed by it. But again, the sense of self itself is a desire, and so what if you can throw light on what you think is happening there?
You say the sense of energy, the fear gets generated only when the self feels that it may not be able to handle that kind of energy. I mean, you consider a person who is in the grip of desire, right? And if you watch such a person and watch his state of mind, right, then how eager he is to grasp the object of his desire, how eager he is to possess it, then what kind of efforts he is doing in order to possess it, and then what kind of further reactions arise in him, because when he finds that his object of desire is possessed by somebody else, then immediately the jealousy, the hatred, and the violence that arises in him, and so on. So it can make a complete mess of that person's life. I mean, when you desire a person, particularly another human being, when you desire,
Ravan.
Yeah, when you desire that another human being, right, because you are attached to him, because you are able to derive that pleasurable sensation, right, then you become very possessive of that being. And that being, then even if he or she looks at another person, that you cannot tolerate. And then the kind of things you do and kind of mess that arises in one's life out of all that. So naturally, when you see the potential of this kind of desire to create havoc in your life, then naturally the response will be in terms of fear, because what if that happens? So the fear is because of this feeling that you may not be able to handle that kind of energy, and therefore one is afraid what will happen. I hope I have tried to answer, but if you have any further point to make in this, you can ask.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So that was helpful that, this sense of self has a perception that it cannot handle it.
Yeah.
And hence it is kind of afraid of that which it cannot handle.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is the desire of the self in itself. So it's almost like a split mechanism, that one desire of self, which is that of kind of existence at any cost, seems to be so afraid of another one, which almost is like, I want to have that object, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that was just more a observation.
Yeah, sometimes there is a duality in desire also. For example, one wants that object, but one wants only the pleasure associated with that object, but one doesn't want the pain which also comes with that object, right? So many times a person asks, how can I have the pleasure and avoid the pain, right? And so then one ends up in conflicting desire, and then only that thing wins when which becomes dominant, in the sense that the desire to have pleasure, if it is overwhelming, then the fear of pain goes in the background. Then the person goes as per the desire for the pleasure. But if the fear of the pain overwhelms, then the person may not go after that object. That fear will prevent him from going after it. So then it's a play of two different psychological reactions. So we are always moving in between these two extremes, completely driven by fear and pleasure or desire. Yeah.
Sir, may I ask you?
Yeah, please.
Now, what we are talking about desire and all that and awareness.
Yeah.
It seems that the awareness is not related to only self.
Yeah.
But you need to understand opposite or the another person well.
Yeah.
That you have to aware of that person also, no?
Yeah, that's right.
Because that is creating the problem.
Yeah, no, your
interaction. I do not know how other person is going to react. I do not know.
Right. Yeah, you don't know, but but at least you can be sensitive to the other person's reactions. Right. Sometimes we are so much taken over by our own that we are totally negligent or neglectful of the other person's reactions, and therefore then we end up in a mess in our relationship with that person.
But that means it is the awareness of, suppose I get the awareness that the opposite person is not aware, then it will create the problem. Then I should be aware that I should keep away from him.
Yeah, I mean, if the other person is not aware of my or not sensitive to my concerns and whatever it is, responses, well, then he's going to create a problem, right? But if I am sensitive to his concerns and also aware that he is not aware of my concerns, right? Then I'll be in a position to avoid all that mess. Although that person may try to create a mess, I will be in a position to avoid it because at least there is awareness on this side.
Yeah, but awareness in this situation, what happens is that my awareness will convey one message to me, and his awareness will convey another message.
No, but he is not aware at all, no?
That can,
no, we have said he is not aware. If he were aware, right, then he will be aware of your concerns also. It is not that awareness is only about particular things, right? We said choiceless awareness, which
so
means
it
that
is a total, what we are talking about is a total awareness from everybody.
yeah, we are talking about choiceless awareness, which means that whatever is presented, there is an awareness of that. Whatever you come in contact with, there is an awareness of that, right? So there is no question of choosing that I am aware only of what is happening within me and I am completely unaware of what is happening to the other. The moment I come in contact with the other, right, there is an awareness of that interaction with the other also and what's happening in that interaction. So in that case, since you are aware, right, you will be in a position to avoid all that mess. But the other person who is not aware, right, he may still try to continue the mess, but he will not succeed because you are aware.
Yeah.
Right.
If I'm aware, I should immediately, if somebody else comes in contact with me, the moment he comes in contact, I should know what type of person he is.
No, that means you are also aware of that contact with that person, right? Then in that contact, whatever is happening, then you are aware of that happening also. Right? It doesn't mean that you are able to read that person's mind immediately as soon as you come in contact. No, it's not. That's not what we are saying. We are saying that when you interact with another person, then in that interaction, whatever that is happening, there is awareness of that happening, right? And so by being aware of what is happening, you are in a position to avoid the mess. For example, if you are say referring to something or some thought, and you find that that thought is provoking a unreasonable or some violent reaction from the other, then you may avoid referring to that, and you may then have another thing in that interaction. So like that, by being aware, you are able to avoid any kind of conflict with that person.
Okay, thank you.
Just one so you mentioned that the desire to be dissociated, when dissociated with thought, then there is energy available. So like my desire is always towards my idea, towards an object, towards a person. So the whole energy is diverted towards it. So can you really put little more light on that? So I'm not really able to get that, how the dissociation of the thought, desire and thought is, for me, it's the same. So how I'm going to dissociate both of them?
So it's not that the thought is trying to dissociate itself from that energy, that sensation, right? Because if thought dissociates, then there is a problem, because then thought will say, what should I do with that energy? What should I do with that sensation? Because thought doesn't know what to do about it. So it's not the thought which is trying to dissociate itself from that sensation, right? But the awareness of the whole nature and movement of desire, right? That awareness is creating that separation, that gap. So thought falls back in its place, the sensation in its place, and the awareness is what is functioning in that case, right? So the out of that awareness, there will be the understanding as to what happens to that sensation, and also what is to be done with the thinking machinery. Right? So the awareness is very important in that situation, and because of that, this separation is happening. It's not that the thought is trying to separate itself from sensation after hearing about what is desire and so on.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So we are almost finished. I think it's almost about 7:30.
Yes, sir.
Do we end this meeting now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
We have had a very nice session.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for everything. Maybe we have many more.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
So thank you, and have a good evening. Have a good evening. Yeah.